Hello and welcome to episode 12 of Late Night Linux, recorded on the 29th of May 2017. I'm Joe, and with me are Jesse.
Good afternoon.
Phelim.
Good evening.
And Ike.
Good morning.
That's all those bases covered then. Right, well, we've got a lot of news to cover and an interview coming up later. So let's get straight into the news and talk about Nextcloud Global Scaaaaaaaaaale, as it says in the doc.
Nextcloud 12, you missed that bit, Joe.
Oh, yes, the crucial part.
Yeah, so it looks like this release is aimed a lot more at enterprise, and they're saying that currently if you try and deploy Nextcloud, you can get up to sort of the tens of thousands of users, but you get to a point where you can't really expand it much more than that. There are bottlenecks here and there. So this is a new sort of way that they've rewritten the base so that you can make it, or as they develop it, you'll be able to get to the millions of users. And so it's obviously aimed at these big enterprises, whether they be schools and universities or other sort of big business, what have you.
It'll definitely help the 10 odd people that use mine, but I welcome it anyway.
Yeah, so it's made up of load balancer and a login server, which then detects where you're logging in from and sends you off to the various nodes. So it sounds like quite a good idea. But as I always say about Nextcloud, it just doesn't feel that ready. Now, Phelim, you use it regularly.
Yeah.
Is it really any good?
Yes.
Is it reliable? Does it sync properly? Does it do the core stuff properly?
Yeah, I think it does. They did take some of those components out so they could make the base more updatable for them, and they made them all apps. I don't know whether that was a great idea, because I think calendaring and contacts was always going to be part of it, but they are kind of blessed apps as well. So I don't know. I've never had any trouble with it. I maybe people do have trouble with it, but I constantly use contacts, calendar. I use the webmail on it if I need a webmail client, and I've had no trouble whatsoever with it. And I've had that server running, almost since it existed. I think it was probably since at least version 3 or 4, and that's the same server install. I mean, fair enough, it's been upgraded, etc., but it's the same thing as been running. So I've had no trouble with it.
Well, it's still running after they contacted your ISP to tell you to stop it.
Well, I update my software as opposed to apparently other people.
So, Jesse, we talked about Nextcloud back on the Linux Loudouts days, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it was basically shit back then.
Yeah, I think we thrashed around with it, trying to compare it directly with Drive, and the thing that the three of us back in the day used Drive largely was for our collaborative show notes, and during the show we could edit them, or we could chuck things in and delete other people's, and we all three went on to the collaborative editing, and it kind of crashed after a while, or someone's didn't refresh. We all got kicked out at one point. It just couldn't quite handle the massive load that 3 people typing letters put on it. But I see that on this they've got a new collaborative thing using, is it Calibra?
That's the ebook thing, isn't it?
No, you're thinking of Calibre. Calibra is the Office suite.
That's what I'm getting confused with. It says, in this release, individual file shares can be made writable, enabling you to share a docx file through a public link and immediately collaborate in a shared editing session with others with Calabra, I'm going to say, online.
Calabra, yeah, but that's the open source software house that does work with OpenOffice and LibreOffice. Whoops.
Oh, yeah. This is ringing a bell to me now. Yeah, so it's basically collaborative LibreOffice. Yeah.
So if they've moved over to that rather than their own in-house collaboration, then maybe these things obviously moved on, and maybe it is more functional now.
Ike, you've been awfully quiet.
Well, a little question's been forming in my mind, right?
Oh dear.
Be afraid. So, me with a very, busy life, always going places, what would... right, Phelim, you use Nextcloud, right?
I do.
Now, are you using this for company stuff or personal stuff?
Both.
Right. So, for your personal stuff, do you have this at home or some random server off in the cloud?
It's a server up in the cloud, yeah. It's an OVH server.
Okay. Oh, yeah, fair play. So, here's another little question for you. On the personal stuff, what would you actually use it for? This is going to sound a really stupid question, but I'm the sort of person who shoves stuff on a disk and forgets about it.
You use Google services, don't you?
I do and I don't. So I have Google
do.
Drive, but I don't really like what it does.
No, either you do or you don't. So
for some stuff, basically uploading screenshots.
Well, I mean, your contacts in your phone are in Google, right?
No.
Right, so you store them on the SIM then.
Yeah.
So you accidentally dropped that phone in a bog in Westmeath, and you're reaching in to get that SIM card out because you know you need those phone numbers.
Yep.
Lovely. Enjoy.
You actually have to have contacts to have contacts.
Oh.
Well.
Okay, so yeah, but you do use things like Google Plus and the like, right? So you use all those apps. I don't use any of the Google stuff. I don't have even Google Apps installed. So for me, I have a phone that has no contacts, no storage, no way to get photos off of there if I want to, unless I'm locally on the box. And I use it for all my calendaring. I use it for my contacts, so I don't have anything stored in the phone. It's all synced with OwnCloud or Nextcloud. Oops. See, I did it again. It's hard to deprogram because it used to be, but I mean, yeah, so for me, I literally would not be able to do what I do with my phone if I didn't have it. Yeah, I could probably try to cobble a few things together, but just, no thanks. I don't have time for that.
And outside of contacts and calendars and stuff, because admittedly that stuff is nice to have synced, I guess, between your desktop, because I know GNOME has good integration with that. I mean, would you store personal stuff on there? Like photos?
To a certain extent, I would. Well, they've got a thing called the automatic upload. I think it's got a catchy name, but I've forgotten what it is. But essentially, you can take a photo on the phone and it'll immediately upload it to a location on Nextcloud.
Yeah, that's called cloud storage, Phelan.
Yes, fine.
It's called Google Photos to me.
Yeah, but it's on my server. So if I've taken a picture of something, I could take a photo of Richard Stallman, and as long as I delete out those GPS coordinates, I'm sure he'd be very happy that it wasn't getting sent up to Google Drive. So, yeah, no, I mean, it's fine if you want to sort of send your pictures, but most of these things where you send your pictures, they're not your pictures anymore. There'll be the legal bump of, yeah, well, everything you send up here is now ours. Ha 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 ha. Until people complain about it.
Yeah, you don't download the original again either. And that it's things like this which it never really used to bother me. But the whole, because I used to be one of those lads, like, I've always considered myself very pragmatic. And, like, there's a necessary amount of evil that you can allow in your life. And I was like that for years, things like even DVD playback and all this silly stuff, like patent encumbered stuff, basically. But especially this year, I'm getting to a point where I don't feel comfortable anymore relying on these services or having my information that's outside of my explicit control, because it's not so much where it's stored, it's the lifetime and ownership of that data. And that's the thing that's starting to get me for a while now. I'm sort of rejecting monopolization, and I think I'm basically slowly turning into you.
Haha. If you give me your postal address after the show, I'll send you out a welcome pack.
I'm sorry.
It's got a badge.
Post?
Well, I mean, that's the reason I like OVH, because if I wanted to, when my server comes to an end or blows up, I can send them, I think it's €70, and they'll send out those drives to me. Now, I don't know how many times I've been copied in between, who knows, but I mean, that's the practical side of it, being slightly pragmatic. You have to put a server somewhere unless you're actually running it from your house.
Yeah.
How is this OVH service different to like other cloud hosted providers?
Well, it's not really a cloud server, it's an actual box, so mine is a server.
Yeah, these are dedicated machines. I use OVH too for the Solus infrastructure. I've got 2 servers with them, and they're fantastic.
All right, well, they're not paying us, so shut up about them. So what about the video calling and stuff? Do we care about that?
I do.
Totally. Yeah. Because Skype has essentially died as a project, and as I don't like using it, but I have to use it for certain clients. And it used to be great to use screen share. Can't do that anymore. I haven't been able to do that for a long time. And I'm going to be able to do that now in Nextcloud. I haven't upgraded to 12 yet, but that is actually going to be very useful.
So for like client support, you can now actually remotely administer their machines.
I don't know whether you can do that, but you can certainly demo somebody through a project and, roll out to a
have the
thing.
voice call and actually see their screen and guide them.
Yeah, that's invaluable. Like,
That's, yeah.
Does it mean we could move away from Mumble then?
Yeah, but Mumble's open source anyway.
Yeah, it's its own thing. Like, yeah, horses for courses, etc. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of nice new features to the new user side of it, and to the admin side on 12. That's going to be great to be able to use, like a lot of the admin tools that they've got put in there. But I'm really, really looking forward to that screen share stuff, because just when you've got a project, you want to show somebody, here, I've been doing this thing for you, blah, 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 walk you through the demo, so you know that I've not been just sitting around doing nothing for weeks. Be great.
Okay, well, I have a challenge for you for a future episode.
Oh, God.
You're going to help me ungoogle my personal life.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, okay. No.
Yeah. I can't do it for all stuff because I'm using Google Apps for Business, because I'm terrified to run a mail server.
That's a fair point. But yes, yeah, let's do it.
Awesome.
Sounds good. All right, well, let's talk about the show Silicon Valley for a second. And we're not going to talk about their seafood app, which is the Spotify for food, which turned out to be just good for filtering out dick pics. Let's talk about the other plot in that, which is a decentralized internet. This is actually real. Blockstack, a gateway to a new decentralized internet using blockchain by the looks of things. I read through this and just thought it sounded like vaporware and lost interest. But Phelim, you put this in, so defend it.
Okay, you give me too much credit for putting it in. I literally copy-pasted in, read the white paper for a couple of pages and went, oh dear God, flashbacks to uni here. And then I went looking for a quicker online guide to it. But yeah, it does look good. It's storage, identity, and payments through essentially Bitcoin, or using
blockchain
Bitcoin infrastructure. Yeah, blockchain. Okay, fine. And it's something we need, because I'm sick and tired of like de-siloing all my info every time a new thing comes out where family or friends are on, that you have to go, right, shite, and sign up for an account on that, right, and all that other stuff that before, do I leave it there? Do I kill off that account? We need to get away from all these data warehouses.
I like that if you go to their install page, you've got Mac OS and Linux coming soon, or developer alpha.
Yeah.
It's early days, to say the least, but it does sound interesting. But you've got that network effect problem, haven't you? That you need to have a lot of people using this for a lot of people to use it, because it's otherwise just worthless. It's like you can create a Mastodon instance, or you can create Mastodon generally, and okay, there's going to be a few thousand people using it, but Telegram's got a few million and WhatsApp's got a few million more. And so, okay, that's not necessarily comparing apples with apples there, but even so, great ideas like this, in theory, need that critical mass to actually work. And so what is going to make people, do people really care about decentralization enough? I fear not.
I think wait till Twitter folds.
Yeah. Also, they might not have Linux binaries issued, but I've just dug through the GitHub. There is, manual instructions for setting up Blockstack portal on your system. I'm kind of interested. I hate the fact that it's using Python and Node.js, and I want to shoot them in the face for that. But
what should be written in C?
There's nothing wrong with Python.
I mean, there's Go, there's Rust. I mean, Node.js you can sort of allow off, but Python and Node, I mean, come on, this is web application stuff. But anyway, I'm still going to give it a go.
You're wrong.
Even if it does say sudo apt-get.
What, no EO package? What's wrong with Will?
How surprising. This never happens to me. Sobs into his pillow.
All right, well, that's obviously one to watch then. Yet another Phelim story. Some KDE bollocks that no one cares about.
Look, we've been doing this stuff for ages. KDE's got it sorted. Everybody else is just catching up slowly. No, KDE Simon. It's coming up to the .5 release. So what it is, it comes from Simon Says, and it's speech control of a computer, I guess, would be the term for it.
Computer, move the mouse.
Close to. I mean, I think it was originally designed for people who had quadriplegia, where they have no ability to control a mouse at all. So there's a great demo video I think we should link to, where the guy is able to tell it to open up a few files. He's able to open a browser, and then where you don't have easily accessible links, which automatically get numerals beside them. So you can say, pick 137 or whatever. You can actually split the screen into segments and then continually keep breaking it down into segments till you literally mouse click the thing that you want. And while that's pretty laborious to do, if you've ever seen somebody with a mouth control for a computer or whatever, it's just, it's scary that, you can actually use a PC when you would imagine you can't use a PC. So, I think it's pretty impressive. And I just thought it was kind of an interesting side to all the Amazon nonsense and
Minecraft.
yeah, and buy me a Ferrari accidentally turning up at your door from Amazon. So I thought it was nice to see that there's an actual useful side to voice recognition.
And you know what really jumped out at me during that demo video was that it had working Alt-Tab.
Really? I didn't actually see that.
Essentially, what was basically Alt-Tab, which, how long have you had that working in Budgie, Ike?
Fuck
2
off.
weeks?
Simon says, gobshite. All right.
Simon says, fuck off. But in all seriousness, right, I said this on Linux Action News yesterday, KDE, that project to me seems to be going from strength to strength. They seem to be innovating where other people are not. Look at what GNOME's doing, just constantly shifting the goalposts of GTK, breaking things. Whereas KDE is, okay, I've never been a massive fan, but I'm warming to it. If you look at things like KDE Connect and this Simon thing, and the fact that since Plasma 5 came out, it's become more and more stable, more and more usable, more and more good. It just, that's how to do things, isn't it? Not the fucking bollocks that GNOME's doing and not being stuck in the past like XFCE is. And Ike is slowly convincing me to move away from XFCE because I'm basically going to have to, because nothing's going to work in it before long.
That's not exactly what I said.
Well, that's pretty much what you said. It's you said to me that it was dead technology, and then I said, look, they're porting the panel to GTK3, and you said, okay, dying technology then, because GTK4 is out soon.
Well, yeah.
Well, I think that's the advantage that KDE has over the likes of GNOME, is the fact that you're not having to constantly engineer the plumbing to then stick the desktop on top of. No wonder they wanted to rip everything out in GNOME, because they're just so tired by the time they got around to finishing GTK3 that they didn't want to actually build anything with it in the first place, just tear it all down.
Well, I mean, even the core Qt stuff has, because I'm switching to Qt now, I'm allowed to say Qt, not Qt. Did you see that?
Yeah, you do that. You won't catch
but
me
definitely
doing
GNOME,
that,
not going for GNOME, but go for Qt, right? Like, even the core APIs of it, like, it's got speech stuff built in. It's got networking stuff built in. It's got JSON stuff built in. And these things might sound fairly trivial, but for me, who's been trying so painfully to defend GTK for years, like GTK is just a UI toolkit, right? But Qt is a platform, and that's a very big difference. There's a lot of stuff available like as bolt-ons on top of GTK, but it's kind of nice having it all there. And then you've got dozens upon dozens of libraries as well as part of the KF5 platform on top of Qt as well. And I think the common theme there, from what I'm seeing, is they're focusing more on the human interface, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that's the big differentiator in terms of focus between the projects.
They got a lot of grief back when they tried to split off from, it became, what was it, KDE software
compilation, maybe.
Yes, that's the one. And they got a lot of grief of, oh, this is stupid, it's KDE or what is it? But I think that was actually a smart move back in the time, because they worked on breaking down the libraries. making them not just for KDE, but also for, if you've got a project, you can include a tiny bit. Now, everybody slags off. Oh, I want to install one KDE app and I took in 15 terabytes of data. Fucking, that's such nonsense. If you do that with any package, you'll get some, but that's mainly down to packaging. It doesn't actually require all of those things together necessarily. And certainly not if you're from a coding standpoint. So I think they're doing well. Yeah, fingers crossed keeps on going that way. So
Jesse, you were using KDE for a bit, but then you switched back. Why?
That's because I was using it on Chaos, and so that's a from the ground up distribution, and it used KDE on the front end. And it wasn't that I moved away from KDE; it was because I moved away from using Chaos. KDE didn't sort of draw me in enough for me to then load it on top of Arch when I moved back to using Arch. I mean, the reason I left Chaos was that it was available software, so you had to, you kept on coming up across software that you couldn't find. Whereas with, Ubuntu or Arch or what have you, there's always the software that you want. And so I left it for that reason, not for KDE, but I do prefer GNOME.
So it didn't have the emeralds you wanted?
Yeah.
what?
Chaos Emeralds.
Okay, right. Sonic joke. That was fucking obscure.
Fuck off.
But imagine that, a distribution built from the ground up that doesn't have all the software you want.
That's crazy talk.
Simon says...
Now, what Simon isn't saying is our next one. So a couple of years ago, Debian moved from Init 5 over to using the Init system that everyone has moved to, System D, and a bunch of greybeards decided to fork it. Ike, can you remind me what the name of the distribution is?
Shit.
No, it starts with a D.
Fuck off.
Okay, so we've had quite a bit of Ike picking, but so Devuan was made.
Right.
We'll go with Devuan. And
so it's not Duvet.
No. And that has now reached its 1.0. And so it's usable, it's out there. If you want to use a Debian base but with a sysv in it, then there you go.
Yeah, and the live image is XFCE, so that's a win as far as I'm concerned, at least for now. And I installed it alongside Debian, and there's not much difference. The installer's a bit clunkier, but apart from that, pretty much the same deal, only with a different init system that makes absolutely no difference to me personally.
Ironic, the last time we talked about System D, I said I hadn't got round to using it. Literally days later, had to get used to using it because I had to write a script to start up Logstash. And now that I've done that, this project means nothing to me.
What, is it easier then?
It's fine, yeah. It's the same. Yeah, to be honest, the less bash scripts that go on forever doing all the same stuff again, the better, to be honest. So
importing LSB common.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
You're just going to make like the file format is basically the same as a .desktop file. Like once you have that down,
4 lines or even less probably. It's
System
great.
D, I know there's a lot of hate against System D, and I'm not necessarily a hater of System D. I hate its tendrils. I do really despise its tendrils because if you're ever looking for a distro and you just, like if you look at the reverse dependencies of it,
yeah,
actual bricks will be shat. But I'm kind of happy that, even though I'm going to continue using System D myself, I am very, very happy that not everybody's putting their eggs in the same basket. Because I think we do need a bit of variety. I think we do need people doing, be it cranky or alternative or whatever, doing things differently. Because you've even got like Void Linux is using Runit and Gentoo is using OpenRC.
Yeah.
So if shit comes on top, there is a way out. So I'm happy for that, and that there is some sort of variety, and it helps to keep things portable as well, which I think is highly important, as opposed to being bound to a single solution.
Well, hang on. That's what I was just about to pull you up on. The fact that, look at GNOME. You can't use GNOME with Devuan because of the dependency on System D. And if System D becomes all pervasive in the distros that people actually use rather than the Gentoos of this world, then surely you're going to get a situation where more desktop environments, more and more software as well, even on the server, depends on systemd. And so it's not portable. You are stuck with systemd, and it has completely taken over.
Yes and no. I mean, some things do link directly against systemd, like at the binary level. They're using like the systemd dbus library, and that's one of the things that kind of pissed me off. Like, I know it was a simpler library and whatever, but it's part of systemd, and you're using that because you're doing it from C, and it's simpler to do dbus, but then you're immediately tied to systemd just because that library was easier to use. You know, I mean, that's a little bit like whoring, as far as I'm concerned. Like, there's no polite way of putting that, right? You went for the easiest option there. That's kind of what you get. Some things don't link directly to it, but they kind of expect systemd behavior. Like, you used to have console kit, but that's very, very dead by now. So you have things like elogind, which will provide a compatibility layer around that. But you're right, it's getting to the point now where it's unavoidable when things are using the libraries of systemd, which, yeah, you're going to have like a patchwork quilt at this rate. I mean, to be fair, even KDE kind of relies on it as well.
Yeah, although I think the FreeBSD version has actually kicked back to life, apparently. So with them holding on, I think they might actually keep it a bit agnostic, maybe.
Yeah, which is good, because if we have this variety and we have these people who aren't accepting it, then instead of being like embroiled in this monopoly later on down the road, where it's like, this is the one true path, it's forcing things to stay portable and agnostic, and everyone benefits that way, as opposed to being tied into this one solution, which is a bit like vendor lock-in. And that's basically what systemd is at this point. Like, I'm not saying for or against it, but it basically is vendor lock-in. Whatever way you want to paint it. And I use systemd, by the way, and I know the comments, they're going to crucify me. But it is. And so is GNU.
Well, just you wait until he gets his hands on the containerization stuff that he's planning.
Okay, so in that scenario, Ike, you're painting that we shouldn't put all of our eggs in this one basket. But then on the flip side, there are other discussions about, like, when Ubuntu started Mir, why weren't they using Wayland? Wouldn't it be good if we all got behind Wayland and had one, replace X with one thing? Where would you divide between we shouldn't all end up going down the systemd path versus we should all back the video server?
Okay, so, I mean, it's a little bit twofold. I mean, one part of it is having these universal standards that are supported by everyone, and that's great. Like, that side of conformity is great. Then there's the competition aspect. If things aren't competing, things don't improve. They will gradually improve, but not out of necessity, right? Wayland at the time was very, very, very slow moving when Mir came about. Then Mir came about, started rustling a few feathers, and all of a sudden Wayland was kicked into high gear. Now, whether people want to admit that or not, the very existence of Mir kicked Wayland into high gear. So, that was a good thing, because there was competing, and at the end, Wayland got better. It doesn't matter if they used the same code or not, they was competing in the same space, so that was better. And while the conformity side is good, because you have, like, this common base, and let's ignore LSB, because that's a fucking joke. LSB dictates that you need to have Qt3 and Qt4 and RPM. So those old standards, they just don't work, right? If we go too far down the conformity path instead of variety, it's a balancing act. If we go too far down that, then the core of every distro will look exactly the same. Now, that might sound good, but you've lost the competition there. So you have this core part of it, which is the systemd Linux OS. Now, that sounds a lot like it's coming out of the mouth of somebody wearing a tinfoil hat, but that is the way that it will go down. And that, whatever way you want to look at it, is not a good thing. Unless somebody has an argument against that, of course.
Well, then you end up with just all of the same distro with different wallpapers.
Yep.
Or on the server, just one distro, I suppose.
There'd be no different ways of doing the core of the OS anymore, because that core of the OS, as much as it'll be open source, it will be this black box self-contained system around systemd, and everyone builds up on top of that. And it's part of the way there already. And that, to me, is deeply concerning because we need that variety, we need that competition, we need that portability. It's in the lifeblood of Linux and every Linux distro out there. It's at a point where, all right, we might laugh and joke and say that some distros need to die, blah, blah, blah. It's only a wallpaper respin. There's a lot of them out there that aren't. And taking over the core of the OS, like outside the domain of a single project and forcing everyone else into line, that's going to eventually kill a lot of distributions, valuable distributions. And I don't think that's good for anybody because it's going to kill diversity and it's going to kill innovation. Conformity at its purest form has never been good for anything.
Well, I can just picture Paddy sitting there listening to this, silently agreeing with you, Ike. So
that's my concern. That's why my views are starting to change this year.
Fair enough. This episode of Late Night Linux is sponsored by Entroware, and Entroware are a dedicated Linux computer seller based here in the UK. And they ship computers with Ubuntu and Ubuntu Mate, 1604 and 1704. And they've got a fair range of laptops and a couple of desktops and even a server.
Yes, you said that they ship Ubuntu there, but actually they ship FreeNAS on this server. The Nucleus, £700. You can get 4 drives in it, up to a maximum of 4 terabytes each. That's 16 terabytes. It's got an 8-core Atom chip, and you get up to 32 gig of RAM. So, you know, it goes all the way from your small to medium enterprise or home servers if you're really nerdy. As you say, a bunch of laptops and some desktops as well. So the full range.
Yeah, and I'm sitting here talking to you guys using one of them now, the Ether, which is an absolutely beautiful machine with a nice 1080p display and 16 gigs of RAM and a Core i5. I didn't need a graphics card, but if you do, then they've got plenty of machines with dedicated graphics. So they've got everything from fairly low-end stuff that's ideal for just web browsing and email and that sort of stuff, all the way through to powerhouses that you can do 3D art and video editing and machine learning and that kind of stuff. And they ship to the UK, Republic of Ireland, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. So check out entroware.com. And if you do buy one of their machines, mention us at checkout so they know we sent you. So yeah, do check them out, entroware.com, for all your Linux computing needs. So a few weeks ago, I went to London Linux meetup. And something I noticed there was effectively the reality of Linux in the real world. And that is that almost everybody there, apart from a few very nerdy, very quiet people who didn't really want to speak to me, used Linux on the server and either Windows or Mac OS on the desktop. And that was surprising to at least some of you, wasn't it? I'm thinking of you, Phelim.
Yeah, I don't know what you would actually be missing. I mean, I genuinely asked that question because to me, I've used it completely since 2002, I think. So, and prior to that, it was like dual boot for 4 or 5 years, whatever. But yeah, I wouldn't know what I'd be missing, to be honest, to do my job. So,
well, can I just put this to you, right? You are a professional sysadmin who deals with Linux all day, so it's not a huge surprise that you can get on with just Linux in your personal life and at work. Whereas, Jesse, you don't have a Windows machine. You don't own a Windows machine, do you? Your flatmate has one, but he's moving out soon, so you're going to be totally Windows-less.
Yeah, I'm going to be fucked if I have to do anything with my remote control.
Yeah, but at work, there's not it may be on the back end possibly, but every client machine is Windows.
Yeah, we use they're Linux machines, but they all log into a big fat Windows server somewhere, and you only see Linux as it's booting up, but then everything I do day to day is absolute Windows to the core. And yeah, I don't have anything at home that's Windows. You know, I'd reflect what Phelim said. I don't see what I would want to do more than what I can do. And so I don't need Windows.
Even with Windows in the server, like you can remote into the boxes. I use KDE remote client to log into Windows box if I need to do admin work on a, say, Exchange server or something like that. So even from that side of things, the protocols are open so I can talk to it. I haven't encountered many a case where there's something that I can't do. Hokey VPN clients maybe, where you know they're locked down to some particular client that you have to run, but when you get down to it, it turns out it's just IPsec or whatever.
But I wonder whether, you're sort of saying that you don't see why people wouldn't switch to Linux because all the things that you need are here. Let's just assume that whatever it is these people are doing, normal day-to-day computing, it's here and usable. But if they don't know that, and to them it's a big step into the unknown, and they know that on the server it does X, Y, Z, and they're all very competent at running servers and big clusters or what have you, but they fear not having, an app store, they fear not having video editing or photo or whatever it might be, and obviously they're in their comfort zone of having an Apple Mac or a Windows laptop, whatever. It's the unknown. It's all very well now that we're here to say, isn't it lovely on this side of the fence, but laughing at the people on the other side. But if you haven't made that transition of a desktop versus knowing what you do day to day on a server, then it can be quite daunting, I suspect. So I'm not that surprised that people who work on a server haven't made the same transition in their personal life to Linux on the desktop.
Well, I met two kinds of people. I met the Mac people and the Windows people. And so the Mac people, I think it's a case of once you have used a Mac, there is no doubt that the hardware is good quality. The screens are lovely. The speakers tend to be really nice.
Is that a past tense, though?
Well, that is certainly up for debate, yes. But if you look at most Windows machines, they're basically garbage. Certainly the lower end stuff, whereas there are no low end Macs. They're all really nice in terms of hardware. So I think that's probably why, if you get used to OS X and the whole Mac ecosystem and you've got an iPhone and stuff, you would end up, you've got Bash, you can SSH out of it into your server, and that's all you need. I mean, you could do your job mostly failing with a Mac, couldn't you, if you threw gritted enough teeth?
I think I'd rather use a Windows machine, bizarrely enough.
Really?
Yeah, I think I would, actually.
All right.
Because I could install Cygwin in it, or I could run a virtual machine to manage it. I mean, I know I can do that on a Mac too, but if you've got one hardware manufacturer and one software manufacturer, it doesn't take much to kill off something that you might be using. And
yeah, but you see, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying, like, if you forgot about all your principles, if I said to you, here's a MacBook, and now you've got to do your job, you could do it. You could import all your keys, and you could SSH into the boxes that you need to do, right? So the thing is, so that's one side of the fence, and I think that the people who are used to Macs aren't going anywhere. And well, except for now with the refresh of the hardware and all the things that have been spoken about, loads, only 16 gigs of RAM, etc. But then you got the Windows people, and they tended to be people who work for big companies where their IT department won't allow them to have anything other than Windows because they're a Windows shop, as it were, and so they're using Cygwin and stuff. And interestingly, I didn't meet anyone there who had even heard of the subsystem, the Windows subsystem for Linux. Because I assumed that, okay, if you're not using Linux on the desktop and you're a Linux professional, then surely you're jumping at this new thing.
I'll be amazed if any IT has Windows 10 yet, though. They're probably still on Windows 7 Enterprise.
Yeah, I mean, I presume, are you on Windows 10, any of your machines, Jesse, at work?
No, they're all 7.
I suppose that speaks volumes, doesn't it? So, yeah, they are basically using PuTTY and Cygwin, and just stuck using Windows because they have to be, and they don't care enough because for them it isn't this philosophy. I mean, I feel like to be asked to put together a show like ours, you have to care about Linux and free software, whereas these people just use it like, I don't know, a carpenter uses a drill or something. It's just a tool for them, and then they go home and get on with their life.
Yeah, but what sad fucks are doing that for their work with no interest in it and then going to a meetup? Like, surely the point of the meetups, from ones that I've been to, I've taken my laptop when I've had a problem, a few years ago when I was even more terrible at Linux than I am now. And so some guys helped me and we got through what the problem was and how I could make it boot properly and what have you. And there was other people talking about, installing Linux on phones. And it was nerdy kind of Linux chat on desktop type stuff. Yet, if these people are know about Linux through the server because that's what they have to do for work, they must have enough interest to then take out their evening and go to the pub and talk more Linux. Like, either they are absolute nutters who live and breathe work, or they enjoy Linux.
Or they're just there networking.
Did you get that impression with the sort of business cards flying around and, buy low, sell high?
It wasn't quite that scene in American Psycho where they're all comparing business cards, but it was. There was certainly networking going on.
Was it IP 4 or 6?
Oh,
Sorry.
Ike, you've been very quiet as usual.
No, I was just laughing in my head at that sad joke. I appreciated it.
I mean, you work for Intel. That's not a secret. And they are, fairly cozy with Microsoft, I suppose you'd say, but they're also very committed to Linux. In your day-to-day life, you don't see any Windows, do you? You do. The cat's out of the bag.
Shit. So I have what's affectionately known as my corporate laptop. That's the one that at the moment has Windows 8.1 on it.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So, like, to do any form of work stuff, like, and it's fairly standard for any company. You VPN, you set up your proxy, standard stuff, right? So you can get onto email, etc., and so they can stop you going on torrent sites, right? The usual sort of shit, right? And then I have the Windows laptop, which is basically, if you want to do anything at the business end ever, like, I don't know, meetings, and that's kind of the main thing I have to have it for. So I'd have to open Outlook. I shit you not. Like, open Outlook and set up a new Link meeting, or Skype for Business, as it's now called. I'll always call it Link. And then you have the Link meetings. So for me, that's the only time it enters into my life. And I may be known, perhaps, for resenting that slightly. Sometimes kicking up a fuss, but it is what it is. And I don't have the alternative tools to do what I need to do, ironically enough.
But they do let you do the development in Linux.
Yeah. I mean, that at the moment is running on a NUC that's running Solus, obviously. And I've got another, do you know the Skull Canyon NUCs? That's my main Clear Linux rig. Do all the stuff on there. Awesome stuff. But when it comes down to the business end of things, like literally business stuff, then, I've got to go over to the Windows laptop, because if I want to do something like use Link, there is Pigeon, which sort of has a plugin, which sort of works, but maybe doesn't, and is manual to set up, and then there's the enterprise stuff, and then the meeting stuff. You need to interrupt with that, but it's not a good story from Linux. And I wish the stuff was better. I'm not the person to make that stuff, because I'm just not invested in it. So yeah, that enters my life, and I hate Windows 8.1. Like, I absolutely hate it with a passion, because it doesn't happen in Windows 10, and they have rolled out that upgrade, by the way. It is there. Like, you'll move the mouse, and then all of a sudden, I'll have a split tiling screen going on. Like, I've only just moved the cursor, so that's my punishment. Like, every Tuesday and Friday, I think.
So even a professional Linux developer,
a distro developer, distro founder, writer of a desktop environment.
Yeah. Because you work for a big company, you're having to use Windows.
Still got to use Windows.
Well, that says it all, doesn't it, really?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fact I'm not happy with, but it's a fact that I ensure I take on board. So you do get people sometimes saying, it's like, you can just use Linux and you don't have to use these other things. And I would call them out and bullshit. Because if I've got to do it, and fucking hell, so is everybody. Right? It's simple as that. So at the time when I can say for every last task that I know that you don't have to use those things, that's my ambition in my life. Completely cut it out. So to find alternatives to pitch in, to make sure the enterprise stuff actually integrates, so I can say goodbye to all that. I mean, to be fair, the bar is set pretty high, because you're trying to integrate with a Windows network, and that there is kind of the problem. If you wasn't in I don't want to say a Windows company, a company using Windows infrastructure, then I think you already have a problem in that sense, because you're asking a lot of Linux for it to do that. If you were starting a new company, or if it was a smaller company, you could just choose not to have that infrastructure in the first place.
Well, yeah, like Phelim is his own boss, has a very small company, and therefore you can choose what IT you use.
Yeah, I mean, to clarify what I mean by that, I don't mean that Linux is in any way crippled and can't do these things. What I'm saying is interrupting with an existing Windows network is a big ask.
Yeah, and that is the reality, that if you're working for a big company, you do have to deal with Windows, because Microsoft, for all their ills, they've got a bloody good sales team, and they have become ubiquitous through good sales, as far as I can see.
I think the funny thing here is, though, that they've become very much a utility. It's to the point where they had to do the subsystem for Linux because those boxes were basically becoming a Windows terminal to log you on and maybe do your email, and then everything else you did was in a VM or whatever. Not for everybody, obviously, but for a lot of development work, that's why they had to do it. So maybe it's hurting them quite a bit at this point, though.
Well, Windows itself, I mean, they don't charge for it anymore because you're enabling software as a service. That's what an OS is about nowadays.
Yeah, but if you are forced into using Windows 10, it's a pretty grim picture, isn't it? There's this Twitter thread that's been going around this week. This fella who locked down Windows 10 and it still was calling home at every possible opportunity. It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder how people put up with it.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It was every step of the way. And you kind of think, how can an enterprise actually even allow that to happen without essentially firewalling the boxes off the internet? But apparently something to do with Windows Update doesn't work then. Now, I don't know whether he was counting having an update server internally or not. I don't know. But, a lot of corporate companies will have a big issue about what talks out as much as what comes back in. I wonder if there's a point where there are going to be a lot of questions raised about it.
Well, this could be part of the explanation as to why Windows 7 persists.
Yeah.
And maybe most companies aren't quite as sadistic as Intel, making you use Windows 8.1. Ike has to stay silent in case he gets fired.
These views are my own. They are not of my employer.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Those are my views. Not that I'm my employer. And Windows 10 has been rolled out. I just don't leave the thing long enough to actually update it or do anything with it.
Fair enough. Well, it'd be interesting to hear from the audience as to whether they can use Linux all the time. It seems that, well, looking at how many people use fucking iTunes to download the podcast, I'd be surprised if anyone was free software only. But I suppose that brings us into the admin section then. So, yeah, thank you everyone who has been supporting us on PayPal and Patreon. Much appreciated. And if you want to join them, latenightlinux.com/support. There's all sorts of options there. And latenightlinux.com/contact, you'll find ways to get in touch with us and tell us about your experience of running Windows at work, probably, including the Telegram group. So latenightlinux.com/telegram if you want to come and chat to us in real time. Usually quite good fun in there. And Foss Talk Live, the event that Ike isn't coming to. Boo. But the three of us are.
It's on the 24th of June in the Harrison in King's Cross in London. All of these words, I don't know what they mean. I'm sure I'll find out soon enough.
Well, you've got no Google Maps. How are you going to find it?
Wow, I'm tempted to not even bring my phone. Dear God, going through the border is going to be a nightmare.
Especially if the Führer wins again.
But
anyway, so yeah, the thing is, this event is sold out. So why am I talking about it? I say sold out. It's free to come. All the tickets have been reserved. But not everyone who's got a ticket will necessarily turn up, and not everyone will necessarily go to every live show, because there's us, Ubuntu Podcast, Linux Voice, and then a drunken mashup, which is going to feature Stuart Langridge of Bad Voltage, me, Dave Megaslippers from Geek News Radio, and also I don't know why does everyone laugh at that? It's just his name.
It's a brilliant name. I just hope he changes it by default to actually be Megaslippers.
I've realised I've misspelled it on the website, but it'll hopefully be fixed by the time anyone sees it. And Marius Quabeck, who does ubuntufun.de. He's German, but he speaks very good English. He's actually flying over. I think he's going to beat your record, Phelim, for the furthest distance travelled.
Damn it.
and certainly for most spent on the trip.
Yeah, okay, he wins.
Yeah. So that last show, anyway, last year, it was a fucking fiasco. I was way too drunk and was swearing at the audience, and we didn't have a plan, and it was just shit, basically. So we actually had a meeting at the weekend, very formal, and decided that what we're going to do is crowdsource the show, essentially. So if you go to fostalk.com/questions, you'll see a Google form where you can ask us the questions. So by us, I don't mean Late Night Linux. I mean me, Stuart, Dave, and Marius. And you don't have to be coming to ask a question, and you can do it anonymously if you want, but it's nice if you give your name, up to you. And if you despise Google, then you can email your questions to questions@fostalk.com, which is what you would do, Phelan, probably.
Yeah, I'll probably be asking why I'm not on it, because clearly it's not going to be any good.
Yeah, probably.
He says bottling during errors.
Yeah. So, do get in touch with your questions, because if you don't have any questions, then I'll have to make something up on the spot and it'll be a fiasco again. So,
so if you want to see that,
yeah, don't send us your questions. But no, it's basically any question you want. The fact is, we're not going to answer all the questions. So if it's something ridiculous, then it's just going in the bin. But if it's something insightful or interesting or funny, then there's a good chance that we might read it out and answer it. So, fostalk.com is where you find all the info on that anyway. We don't talk about Fedora very often, so we thought it would be a nice idea to invite Matthew Miller from the project onto the show. And Jesse and I spoke to him last week, I think it was. So let's hear that now. We're now joined by Matthew Miller, who is the Fedora project leader. So welcome, Matthew.
Hi, nice to be with you.
It's good to have you. So the reason I asked you to come on the show is to tell us what is great about Fedora. Give us the kind of sales pitch, because we don't hear too much about Fedora generally. We hear a lot about Ubuntu. So I know it's difficult to sum it up in one sentence, so I'll give you a bit more than that. But what is great about Fedora? Why should people be using it?
Yeah, so to start, I hope you do start hearing a lot more about Fedora in the future. We're trying to work a little bit on our marketing. We've always really had really good technical work and a really good community. And we're going to try and work on, sort of selling ourselves a little bit more in the next year or so. So I hope you hear a lot more about Fedora, and also, some grassroots things as more and more people discover what is so great. So I think to answer the question, there are two big things, and there are those technical things and the community. And on the technical side, we have a very nice leading edge distribution where we try to follow the balance between being bleeding edge and being out of date. And I think that we walk that, I will humbly say, better than anyone else does. We do a really good job of keeping things up to date, while still, every time a new release comes out, you can trust that you can install that release, right on the day one, and it will be in good quality, and that if it's not ready to go, we'll tell you so. And so you can count on it being good quality and then up to date, with a lot of polish and a lot of engineering that goes into it from people who work directly on Fedora and work also in upstreams. So we have good relationships with GNOME and kernel and a bunch of the software that goes into making the distribution. And so a lot of that work is goes directly into Fedora very quickly. And then the other thing is, we are really a community project. Something like 3,000 people work on Fedora in some capacity every year. I mean, that might be as little as editing a wiki page, or giving QA feedback on one update, or it might be a big contribution. And about 300 of those, about a tenth of people, do about 2/3 the work, which I think is a pretty good ratio for that split. Sometimes it's more like 10/90, so we've got a nice long tail. And also, of those 300, about 100 of them work for Red Hat, and 200 work for other companies or universities, or just doing stuff on their own. So we have a pretty diverse community project, and we have a leadership structure that reflects that. So anybody in the community can have direct influence on how Fedora goes, which I think is also unique for a distribution which has a large corporate sponsor.
That's a fantastic intro pitch. You mentioned there sort of the difficulty of being on the bleeding edge versus being old. I see Fedora 26 Alpha is out. What are the sort of the new things that are coming with Fedora 26 that you want to shout about?
So we just entered our beta freeze for Fedora 26, which the beta is going to be coming out at the end of the month, something like that, if everything goes well. And I've actually been running the alpha and the pre-release. Actually, I updated to that before the alpha came out, and it's been very polished throughout. So I'm taking me a little bit to remember what's new and what's coming up, because I'm already living on, what should be the bleeding edge, but there's actually been no blood. It's been very nice so far. So we have in Fedora Workstation, which is our primary desktop distribution, we have a new version of GNOME that has better Wayland integration. It's made to, I think there's some icon refinement. I know there's a built-in nightlight thing, so it can do the redshift thing at night to help you if you're up on your computer at night. So some of those kind of things are there for the workstation. I know for Fedora ARM, the Raspberry Pi support is going to be much better. I think there's something like a 2 to 3 times speed improvement in I/O performance on the Pi. So that's kind of exciting. Overall, this is a release with just a whole bunch of changes across the board. I don't think there's anything that's really a gigantic flagship feature, but there's a lot of newer versions of everything that's going on out there in the open source world.
So the desktop version, Workstation, who is that aimed at? Where does that sit in relation to other distros like Ubuntu on one end and Arch on the other, say?
Yeah, so Our main focus for that basically is software developers and technical users. We think that, it's great for anybody can run Linux on their desktop, and we think it's a good distribution that is basically easy to use for anyone. But we think it really is particularly good for people who are maybe working on targeting enterprise Linux for their production, and they want to run something that's somewhat similar on their desktop. They want to have a nice polished out of the box experience. We try to make it a little bit so you can focus on your work rather than having to hack on the distribution. So something like Arch, Arch is awesome and is super fun, but it's a lot of I'm running Arch because I like to spend a lot of time running Arch. And if you would like to mess around with Fedora in that way, we definitely invite you to be a Fedora contributor. But if you just want to be a Fedora user, you should be able to use it and have it get out of your way and not be any nonsense. On the other hand, we do expect our audience to be fairly technical. We expect people who want to customize things to be able to install extensions. We expect that people will be using the terminal a lot. And so we've put, some enhancements to make terminal use easier. Like we hooked up notifications. So if you have a long running job, and running in a terminal, you'll get a GNOME shell notification for it. Things like that. And we're going to be working on making more features that appeal to software developers in the future.
So it sounds like it's not really recommended to, put on someone's machine who's never used Linux before.
So, yeah, I don't think that there'll be any problem for that person. I think that if you haven't used Linux before, it's a perfectly fine thing. We just have kind of put our focus on the more technical audience, just because we want to make sure that that's what we think we can really succeed at, and we wanted to focus more on that.
So there's been a few news stories that we've covered on Late Night Linux, and they've sort of centered around the way in which some of the younger distributions or software groups that have come together have had trouble with their management, with their structure, with the way that they're sort of interacting with each other and with their fledgling communities and things. So could you just give a brief overview of the hierarchy, I assume from you downwards, and how that works with Fedora, and especially with your big community base?
Yeah, so I think Fedora went through those struggles, more than a decade ago. So I sympathize with everybody else, and it's taken us a while to get things right. And I think that if we'd started with the structure we have now, it might not have worked, but it does work. If you look at the hierarchy of governance, it actually is pretty complicated. I would kind of hesitate to say that I'm at the top of it, because it really is a community-based thing with, community decision-making and leadership. And so I kind of try to facilitate. I certainly am not a dictator of any sort. But our top-level structure is the Fedora Council, which has 6 permanent members and then some adjunct members. Some of them are hired by Red Hat, like me, and then we have Brian Exelbeard, who is the Fedora Community Action and Impact Coordinator. Kind of is focused on building the community and supporting the community. And then someone who represents sort of the engineering side of the project, someone else who represents sort of the mindshare and marketing side, and then a couple elected sort of at-large members as well. And one of the really unique things is that we use consensus-based decision-making for everything. So for a lot of decisions, it's basically lazy consensus. You say, I'm going to do this. This is in my area. This is what I want to do. And then if nobody says anything within a couple days, it's taken as approved. That kind of cuts down on the bureaucracy and the waiting to get things done.
Yeah, this sounds like a method I need to use at my work. That's a great idea.
Yeah, it really is. And also, if somebody objects, they can't just say, "No, I hate it." It's got to be a valid, justified objection, or else it doesn't really count. For more formal things, we actually do a thing where we count the votes, and you say, okay, we need to have a 2-week comment period, and we need to have at least 3 +1s in addition to not having any negatives. But anybody who is one of these full board members can, block something if they've got a valid objection to it. So that includes, me as a Red Hat employee, or, someone who's elected from the community, basically have equal power in that decision making, which I think is very powerful. Although I should also point out that as a Red Hat employee, one of the awesome things Red Hat does is we have actually a rule that says if you're working in an upstream community and you need to make decisions about that community, and there's something that would go against Red Hat's interests, but it's really for the best of that community, you can put the community first, and you won't get fired for it. So I think that's an awesome thing about my employer. I should put in a plug there as well.
Yeah, so it's an important safety net to have, sure.
Yeah. But then, so that's kind of the top level structure. And then we also have, basically a technical steering committee, the Fedora engineering steering committee. The Fedora ambassadors have their own committee. And a lot of those actually run by more straightforward voting. But, each little group in Fedora kind of does its own self-organizing about how they want to run things. Sort of the authority kind of flows down from the council, but it also flows up from everybody's decisions into the council as well.
So something that's been big news over the last, few months and certainly has appeared in the last couple of weeks is the Windows subsystem for Linux, which was originally just Ubuntu, but now is SUSE. I'm not sure which version, but also Fedora. So I wanted to ask you about that. What is involved? What was involved? Did Microsoft come to you and ask, or did they just do it? Presumably they must have had to ask.
Microsoft came to us and asked for some involvement in there. We have Seth Jennings is doing a lot of work on the actual technical side of making that happen and working with the Microsoft guys who are really great and really kind of enthused about it and very sincere about open source. So I was pretty impressed by that. I think it's an interesting thing. I think it's nice to have Fedora there. I think it kind of helps expose people to open source who might not have otherwise. There are a whole large number of people who are running Windows, and they might be a little bit afraid to dip their toes into a whole Linux distribution, even though we try to make that as easy as possible. So I think this gives them more exposure. I think it's also good for people who, have to use Windows for their job or whatever. There are a lot of people who are, they work at a big organization where Windows is mandated on the desktop, but then they're deploying to like Red Hat Enterprise Linux somewhere. And so having Fedora available locally in some way or another is nice for them. So I think it's a cool thing.
And what version of Fedora is it going to be then?
So it's going to be 25 or 26 when it's actually in there. I'm not sure. It kind of depends on the timing of 26. And we're going to try and keep it updated with the latest version as it goes.
We had a bit of a question on our last show that we couldn't answer, and I'm wondering, I hope you can give us an answer without going over the line with your employer. But why is it Fedora, and why wouldn't it have been, is it CentOS, the other version?
Yeah. Why isn't what, I guess, or why isn't it in...
On Windows, on the Windows subsystem for Linux?
You know what? I actually don't know. I talk to the CentOS people sometimes, but I think it's possible to do with the version of things. Maybe they needed things to be newer. I'm not actually sure. Microsoft came to us. They said they'd been getting something like 40 to 50 requests a day for Fedora running on it. So
that's fine. Just take the ego boost. Yes,
right. I know. I was like, well, I guess it's what the people wanted.
Yeah.
Presumably it's the server version rather than Atomic then.
Yeah, so this is Fedora. It is going to be it's similar to Fedora Server, although Fedora Server has some stuff like Cockpit running, which is a interface for web-based control of the system. I'm not sure that will be there. It's going to be more of the Fedora everything thing in a minimal point of view. As I understand it, people have been getting X-based things to run. You run an X server on your Windows and forward to it, and it works, although Microsoft doesn't currently support that. And I don't know, possibly that'll be the answer in the future. Possibly there'll be a Wayland backend for it or something. That would be kind of interesting to see. And then also another way to get some of this open source software running on Windows. Get Darktable on Windows for the first time, I guess. But yeah, basically it's mostly meant to be a command line environment for developers.
Joe mentioned Atomic there. Can you just sort of give the pitch on Atomic? I know it's been told to me before, but it's all getting a bit muddled in my head.
Yeah, so Atomic is our host platform, or it's our project for running containers on Linux. And so we have Fedora Atomic Host, which is it is not as tiny as it will ultimately be, but basically optimized for running container workloads. And we use a technology called OS Tree, which is basically Git for your system binaries. So you have a sort of a commit stream that you can check out and update to the latest version of. If something goes wrong, you can go back to a previous one. And those updates are all done atomically. So you are never getting a state where you have a half-done update. You do the update, then you reboot into the new one. It's kind of like a red-green or A/B deployment, except for instead of being locked to the two, you can actually go to any point backwards and forwards. You can even do the equivalent of git bisect to find if there's a bug. And then on top of that, we have OCI Docker containers basically to run your workloads. One of the interesting things we're doing there too is we are actually creating OCI Docker containers as part of a build service in our infrastructure. So the distribution is primarily composed of RPMs, and so we have a system where you can make a Docker file and as a Fedora contributor, basically have container images using RPMs in Fedora generated automatically, and then those get rebuilt automatically as those RPMs change. So it's pretty easy for us to build and distribute, say, like a LAMP stack in a container to run on Atomic.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
So another big thing over the last year or so has been the new packaging formats, Flatpak and Snaps, etc. To what extent does Fedora support those then?
So this actually ties into the Atomic thing pretty well, really, because we're looking at trying to figure out how to deliver a containerized desktop in a sort of similar way that Atomic gives us a server solution. So we're looking at doing sort of a Fedora Atomic workstation, and in order to do that, you've got this OS tree based base system, and then your applications have to come from somewhere. So Flatpak lets us have a nice separation between the base operating system and applications. So your applications can be updated. They can come from different sources without being confusing. Right now, if you try to mix together a lot of RPM sources, you can kind of back yourself into a corner pretty easily, but different Flatpaks can coexist. You can have different versions of things. So a lot of the people who work on GNOME and work on Flatpak also work on Fedora, so there's kind of a natural synergy there, and the Fedora Workstation people are pretty excited about it. I think we'll see some more kind of around the Fedora 27, 28 timeframe this fall, and or the spring if you're in Australia, or a year from now in the Fedora 28 release. But I think it's worth keeping an eye on. I know there's also Snappy support in Fedora. Some of our contributors have worked on that. It doesn't have a SE Linux support right now, so the security sandboxing is a little dodgy. I think that's being worked on. Another big concern with Flatpak, you can basically choose a runtime, so you can have a Fedora-based runtime or an OpenSUSE-based runtime or whatever. With Snappy as it exists, basically the runtime for all snaps is Ubuntu, and candidly, that is not so interesting to us as a distro-neutral mechanism. It more feels like a Ubuntu at the center of everything mechanism. So,
but isn't that supposed to be the point of it? That it started out as Ubuntu only, or based on Ubuntu, but they're trying to make it a bit more distro agnostic.
Yeah, so they're trying to make it so it runs on any distro. I know that they said they are open to making it so it could use any runtime, but as far as I know, there hasn't been any work on that. So it certainly becomes a lot more interesting to me once we can build something that is built pure Fedora with we can provide Fedora based snaps. That might be something to look at, but I think it's kind of taking a wait and see attitude until that kind of stuff develops.
Yeah, fair enough. So I see at the moment the Fedora 26 Alpha is around. When are we going to see the actual release of that then?
Yeah, so the beta is scheduled for May 30th, so knock on wood, that should come out on time with no trouble, and I think it's looking pretty smooth right now. And then the final release is currently scheduled for June 27th. I wouldn't be terribly surprised if it slips a little bit into July, because, again, we try to make sure that everything is polished when we send it out the door.
Yeah, you don't go for hard release dates, do you? You kind of make sure it's ready.
Yeah, we try to have this hybrid approach between, we want to make sure we get out a release roughly every 6 months, but we want to make sure that it's ready every time. That sometimes has been a little bit confusing for people because they're like, Fedora is slipping again, but it really is an emphasis on making sure that, users get the quality that they expect from Fedora every time.
And currently Fedora, I mean, we're not using it as a very hard gauge, but Fedora is number 7 on DistroWatch. Given that you're saying about having better sort of community discussions and involvement and, spreading the word and what have you, what's your prediction for the end of the year position?
I don't take the DistroWatch numbers very seriously at all. I think they more to do with search engine optimization. I think some distros have had, like DistroWatch on the homepage for their distro that comes up, things like that kind of skew the results. Even DistroWatch says not to take those numbers seriously. So, that's not one of the things I really use as a metric.
So number one then.
Number one, that's, number one or number 30. Seriously, I really don't care.
Fair enough. Okay, well, so it's getfedora.org is the website. Okay, well, we'll put a link to that in the show notes, and thanks for coming on, and hopefully speak to you again at some point.
Yeah, thanks. Great to talk to you guys.
Well, you're awful nice to him.
Well, it's one thing to have someone ask to come on the show, and then you can get the bats out and beat them like we did with Yoss. But if you invite someone on, you've got to be polite.
Yeah. I bet Yoss is wishing he was in this position.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is that we never talk about Fedora, and I am genuinely interested in it. Why is it that we don't use it? And Matthew made some pretty good arguments for using it, as far as I can see.
Yeah, it was good to hear, and I think it'd be good to get back at them a bit later on, see how they've been getting on. Because I mean, I don't know whether it's something to do with being in Europe. Well, I just never even think of it, to be honest. Yeah,
I think it's a good idea to invite him or maybe someone else back on and see. He talked about engaging more with the community, so hopefully we'll hear a bit more from them at some point very soon. So I suppose we'd better wrap it up then. Ike needs to get to the shop before they close so he can buy some bread and energy drinks probably.
And Jesse needs to get on his plane to New York, up chop.
Yeah. Okay, right. Well, we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. In the meantime, I've been Joe.
I've been Phelan.
I'm still Ike.
Well, I've been Jesse.
See you later.
Slán.